There's someone in your life who grew up without much. Maybe they don't talk about it. Maybe you only know because of the small things. The way they pause before ordering at a restaurant. The way they never throw away a Ziploc bag. The way they have a 6-month emergency fund but won't buy themselves new shoes until the old ones are falling apart. And you think they're doing fine now. Why do they still live like this? Or maybe that person is you. Here's what nobody tells you about growing up in economic crisis, whether that's a family that lost everything, a country mid-collapse, or a childhood defined by the words, "We can't afford that." The crisis ends. The money psychology doesn't. Neuroscience backs this up. The brain's threat detection system, once calibrated to scarcity, doesn't simply reset when circumstances improve. It keeps scanning. It keeps preparing for the floor to drop. Because once, it did. And what gets built on top of that foundation is one of the most fascinating, contradictory, and honestly kind of genius money personalities you'll ever encounter. This is the money psychology of people who grew up in crisis. And once you see it, you'll recognize it everywhere. Here's the first thing you need to understand. The brain doesn't distinguish between "I was poor" and "I am poor" the way logic does. Research out of Princeton found that financial scarcity actively reshapes cognitive function. It consumes mental bandwidth the way a virus consumes RAM. And here's the kicker. Those neural pathways, once formed, are incredibly persistent. So your coworker who grew up with nothing, who now earns 6 figures, part of her brain is still that kid watching her mom count change at the grocery store checkout. She's not being irrational when she stockpiles canned goods or checks her bank balance 4 times a day. She's running software written in childhood that never got uninstalled. The scarcity mindset outlives the scarcity. Psychologists have a term for it: crisis coded. The financial wiring installed during survival mode that never powers down, even when the emergency is long over. It shows up everywhere. In the inability to feel enough, in the hoarding of small things, in the anxiety that spikes when a bank account dips below a certain number, even if that number is completely arbitrary. They don't save because things are going well. They save because they remember when they weren't. Now here's where it gets interesting. Growing up in crisis doesn't produce one money type. It produces 2 completely opposite ones. Camp 1. The hoarders. These are the people who grip money so tightly it leaves marks. Every dollar is protected, tracked, justified. They negotiate everything. They feel physical discomfort spending on anything that isn't strictly necessary. They are, by any metric, financially responsible, and also kind of miserable about it. Camp 2. The spenders. Same childhood. Completely different wiring. These are the people who spend money the moment it arrives. Not because they're irresponsible, but because they learned that money disappears anyway. Why let the crisis take it when you could get something out of it first? Their psychology says, security is an illusion, so enjoy now. Financial therapist Brad Klontz calls these money scripts, the unconscious beliefs written during formative experiences. Same crisis, different scripts. One child watched money disappear and concluded, hold tighter. Another watched money disappear and concluded, holding doesn't work. Neither is wrong. Both are just responding to the same data with different conclusions. Ask someone who grew up poor what they think about banks, and then watch their face. A 2022 FDIC survey found that households that experienced financial hardship are significantly more likely to be unbanked or underbanked, even decades later, even after their income recovers. Cash hidden in envelopes. Money in credit unions, not banks. Deep skepticism about anything requiring a signature, and a trust fall into a corporate system. This isn't ignorance. It's memory. They remember when the bank said there was nothing in the account, when the landlord said pay or leave, when the government system that was supposed to help had a 6-week waiting list. Institutions failed them at the worst possible moment. And that's not something you just forgive because your tax bracket changed. So they keep paper records. They verify everything twice. They want to talk to a human, not a chatbot, when something goes wrong. And they are the first people to read every single line of a contract because they've been burned by the lines other people skip. It's not paranoia. It's pattern recognition. Here's a trait that looks like a superpower until it isn't. People who grew up in crisis learned to do everything themselves. They fixed their own cars. They cook from scratch. They figure things out because there was no one else to call and no money to hire anyone. The resourcefulness is real, and it is impressive. But it creates a trap. The same self-reliance that kept them afloat as kids makes it nearly impossible to accept help as adults, even when paying for help would be the smarter financial move. They'll spend 40 hours learning to do something themselves that a professional could do in 4 because asking feels like losing, like admitting they can't handle it. Financial advisor Carl Richards calls this the do-it-yourself debt, the hidden cost of refusing to delegate, outsource, or trust. For people who grew up in crisis, the DIY instinct is survival-coded. Unlearning it is some of the hardest financial work they'll ever do. Here's the stat that surprises everyone. Research consistently finds that lower-income households give a higher percentage of their income to charity than wealthy ones. And people who grew up poor? They give even when they arguably can't afford to. This isn't recklessness. It's memory again. When you know what it feels like to have nothing and someone else is standing in that same spot, you give. You give because you remember what it felt like when someone helped you, or when no one did. You give because you understand, viscerally, that the person asking isn't lazy or irresponsible. They're just in a moment you recognize. The shadow side? This generosity sometimes comes at their own expense. The family member who always loans money that never comes back. The friend who can't say no to a GoFundMe even when they're behind on their own bills. The same empathy that makes them beautiful humans can make them financially vulnerable ones. And finally, this. People who grew up in crisis don't just save for retirement. They save to leave something behind. Because they know exactly what it means to inherit nothing. They know the specific weight of starting from zero. Not as an inspirational abstraction, but as a lived reality. And they are determined, sometimes to a degree that borders on obsession, to make sure the next generation doesn't start from the same place. It drives the life insurance policies taken out early. The custodial accounts opened for kids before the kids can walk. The house purchased not just as a home, but as an asset to pass on. The goal isn't wealth. The goal is a different starting line for the people they love. So here's what the money psychology of crisis-raised people really tells us. They're not paranoid. They're not irrational. They're not stuck in the past. They're adapted. Specifically, precisely adapted to a world that showed them, early and clearly, that stability is never guaranteed. Institutions aren't always safe, and the only things you can count on are the habits you build and the people you love. Their money habits aren't flaws. They're crisis-coded survival strategies, written in a language shaped by circumstances most people never had to face. And honestly, once you understand where they come from, they make perfect sense. Drop a comment. Do you recognize any of these habits in yourself or someone you know? And if you want more psychology behind why we do what we do with money, subscribe, because your financial behavior isn't random. It's a response to the world that made you.